How do we know if we're moving in the right directions in our career, in our business, or in our relationships? Are you climbing a ladder, but we're on the wrong wall? Are you climbing that ladder of success, but you're not climbing it in the direction that you should be? Are you following popularity? Are you taking the path of least resistance? Dr. Kelly Flanagan tells us a story that's going to stick with you and make you really question, are you following the path of least resistance or not, and what you can do about it. He also talks about relationships, an approach to how we should build relationships and who we should build them with that I haven't heard before. And finally, he has a definition of passion that you are going to really want to understand. He combines some different definitions and it's really impactful. Check it out. Hello and welcome to the Purpose Matrix. I'm really honored for today's guest, Mr. Kelly Flanagan. Kelly, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Phil. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great to have you, and a very, very in-demand speaker. And by the way, I need to correct myself out of the gate here, but Dr. Kelly Flanagan. Dr. Flanagan, I appreciate your time. So if you haven't figured out, clinical psychologist and relationship expert. He has been featured all over the place, speaking on shows, whatnot. So the Today Show, the 5 Love Languages, HuffPost, Reader's Digest, Success Magazine. He has been in the media. He's a big deal. And I'm really honored for him to take the time to be with us and be with you today. Author of multiple #1 and new releases on relationships, the book Lovable, which we're going to talk about today, and True Companions, and also best-selling novel, the first book of his that I read, The Unhiding of Elijah Campbell, which is a great, easy read and really impactful. And there's different parts of that will really, will really connect with you, whoever you are. So, and again, just a really sought after speaker, in demand to be on shows and podcasts. I want to start with a question that, before we get into the backstory, I want to hear some of that, but the first thing people are thinking is, like a book Lovable. You see it on my shelf here if you're watching on YouTube. But Lovable, and my audience is kind of hard driving entrepreneurs and leaders, men and women. But they're like, Lovable. Why? Tell me why this has resonated so much with that audience.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Phil, I can't wait to quote you at the dinner table tonight and say that somebody said I'm a big deal today, and then watch my teenagers' eyes roll backward out of their heads. That's going to be great. So Lovable, right? Like, this is such an interesting, so when I was writing Lovable, at that point, my core following, I'd had a number of letters to my daughter go viral online. One of them landed us on the Today Show. It was a letter called Words from the Makeup Aisle from a Father to His Daughter, and it was about her inner beauty as opposed to her outer beauty. Both of them important, but one eternal and the other one passing, right? And it really it hit with a certain audience, and that audience was mostly Christian women in the 25 to 45, 55 demographic. And so as I was writing Lovable, that was the audience that was presumed that book would land the most with. In fact, I had one of my first reviews on Goodreads was from a guy who said, it's a great book, it's just not for men, right? And so the presumption was that was the audience for the book. And then I got invited to speak at a Front Row Dads event about Lovable.
I was just with John Vroman yesterday. Great guy. Really? Anyway, Front Row Dad. By the way, we haven't talked about Front Row Dads. So another just great, like we've talked about a lot of different network, like mastermind groups and stuff. So John Vroman and Front Row Dads, absolutely, what a great guy. But anyway, you were at an event, or you got invited to an event with Front Row Dads. Yeah, John invited me to speak at one of their retreats in 2018, and then from there invited me to speak with him at one of John Berghoff and Hal Elrod's events, Best Year Ever Blueprint. Mike McCarthy was at that event and invited me to co-facilitate a couples retreat, and then from there I just discovered that the Go Abundance community of men in particular is a really special group of guys who have big ambitions but also big hearts. And Lovable is a book. Early on, I explained that I'm writing to my children for sure in that book, but I'm also writing to the little kid in me. And the little kid in me, when I first started publishing those letters to my daughter, what struck me was I was getting thousands of emails at the time, and these emails weren't saying like, "Oh, I'm going to save this letter for my
granddaughter, or I'm going to write a letter like this to my daughter. The emails were all saying, I needed to hear these words. I needed to be reminded that I'm good enough, that I belong, that I have a purpose, that I matter. And I realized that there's a little kid in every person waiting on a love letter still. And so I was writing this book to my kids, but I was also writing this book to the little boy in me who still needed to hear these things. And I think there's enough in certain entrepreneurial communities, there's enough commitment to personal growth that men are beginning to discover that they have parts of themselves that are still needing work, are still needing healing, are still needing acceptance and integration. And so I think this book sort of puts language to that for men. And so ironically, over the last 7 or 8 years, the biggest audience for Lovable, this book with a big red heart on the cover, has been entrepreneurial men.
Right. And what's interesting, by the way, not just that you targeted 25, I think you said, to 55-year-old Christian women, but also, you know, as I'm going through this book writing process and trying to figure this out myself, who reads books? That demographic, right? Like men don't really read books. So like you not only you targeted the demographic that reads books, and you had this whole different, really amazing impact on a whole completely different demographic than you had. And I guess like I want to stay there for a minute. So entrepreneurial, men or women, right? Because this definitely applies to women too. It's not like, hey, I mean, this is just a great book about, I think, human beings, right? Like
correct.
What is the, like, what's the struggle? What are people struggling with that the book connects with so much?
So, my understanding of that has evolved since the book was released 8 years ago. And in the book, I talk a lot about how the core, I call it the original wound that we are all struggling with, is shame, is the belief that we're not good enough. And that our lives sort of get caught up in a shame management project where we are trying to prove that we're good enough. And our relationships are often a testing ground for that. So we show up to our relationships not to serve and to care and to sacrifice, but to prove our worth and have that affirmed by somebody else. And so it becomes sort of this tug of war rather than this place of togetherness. And our vocation, our work, our influence on the world becomes more an effort to prove that we're enough than to really stay attuned to our passions and our intuitions and to follow our instincts about how we're being called to serve and to care for the world. So this shame thing sort of becomes the driving force behind everything we're doing and the ways we're relating. And so Lovable was about beginning to undo that so that we can live from a much more authentic, original center, a true self, our soul. And in the years since then, I think one of the things I've added to that is in Lovable, I talk about how shame is a message that's sort of inserted into us from the outside, right? By culture, by well-meaning people, and by some not so well-meaning people, of course. But increasingly, I'm aware that really the core experience that is just a shock to the human child is loneliness and separation. I call it the ordinary trauma that we sort of all experience as children. And for a lot of us, shame is actually the explanation we come up with for our loneliness. Man, I'm lonely. I'm separate from my people. That's scary. That hurts. Why am I so lonely? There must be something wrong with me. Yeah. Maybe if I can fix me, maybe if I can prove I'm worth being with, then I won't have to be lonely anymore. So shame is actually, like, in a way, the first attempt to solve the loneliness. And of course, as you know, I've got a book coming out here in a bit on March 3rd, in which I unpack that level of it a little bit more, how to address that core loneliness, and how to make sure that we're not showing up from that place all the time. So, in that sense, loneliness and shame would be my total answer at this point to the question of what's going on underneath the hood that drives so much of this dysfunction.
Coincidentally, I mentioned John Broman, but there was a discussion because I think shame. is real with dads, with entrepreneurs, with business owners, with leaders in businesses, right? But there was a discussion on shame versus guilt, which I hadn't really heard before. But yes. I guess is shame healthy?
Great question. And this is a particularly important distinction, I think, for people of faith, because the words, particularly in like religious texts, the words shame and guilt are often used interchangeably. And that's understandable. I mean, our emotional and psychological intelligence is growing as humans. And so we're starting to understand nuance and distinction that we didn't when those were originally written. So they're very different. And I think what most professionals would say is that guilt is healthy and shame is unhealthy. So guilt seems to be this sort of natural emotional response that's built into our DNA. It's a part of our conscience, right? It's the sense of, I did something wrong and now I need to repair that thing. It's a motivating, energizing sort of emotional experience when it's pure, when it's just purely guilt. It's like, oh man, I messed up. I need to ask forgiveness. I need to apologize. I need to reconcile. I need to redeem. I need to fix. Shame, on the other hand, is a false belief. Not that I did something wrong, but I am something wrong. Right? And if I am something wrong, then the primary solution to that is to hide what is wrong about me. Right? And to present a different image to the world. And so that is not about showing up authentically and assertively and repairing and fixing. It's about hiding and pretending and falsifying who we are. So shame, this belief that we are something wrong, generally does not produce healthy outcomes in the world, whereas guilt actually produces redemptive outcomes.
Yeah. So I want to talk about this. I haven't really talked about this much on the show, but I think it's appropriate. So this is going to it might turn into a therapy session for Phil here, and maybe others have some issues that I have too. But so Kelly, Dr. Flanagan, I didn't tell you, but so we have 5 kids. Ages
call me
5.
Kelly, by the way. Kelly's fine. Yeah.
5 kids, ages 5 to 14, about to be 6 to 14 in a couple of days, actually.
Wow.
There's chaos, right? And chaos. And then I'm an entrepreneur, and my mind can be on business, even though I want to be present. I want to be at home. I want to be engaged. When there's chaos, I want to enjoy the chaos and like embrace it, but I don't always do that, right? And then I try to correct and fix and control and all these things. And then there's, kids are kids. So there's maybe lack of respect or things that trigger me and get me excited. And then I overreact, lack of patience, right? So in this, so if I have guilt or shame, probably some of both, I'm sure, help me, fix me. I mean, tell me what to do about, whether I fix the beginning of it. Cause I think I have, the way you said shame is that's like, I'm defining that as that's who I am. And I'm trying to get away. Like, I don't want to get triggered. I don't want to get excited with the kids, but I still do, unfortunately.
Yes. So I love that request, fix me, because it is, the question often defines the answer, right? And that phrase, fix me, says there must be something really wrong with me, right? So fix what's broken in here. I love the way you started off, which is 5 kids between the ages of 6 and 14. It's chaos, right? There's some grace in that for yourself. That's a good starting point. Like, this is going to be stressful and triggering for anybody. If shame is what is leading the way, in the sense that, like, if I get triggered, if I react, if I don't show up as my best self sometimes, there's something wrong with me and I need to eliminate that behavior. You're actually going to see that behavior happens more frequently. The emotional load that shame and there's something wrong with me and I need to fix me adds to your internal world.
That's
now it's creating more internal stress, right? Versus this is chaos and I'm going to make some mistakes. And when I do, I need to feel guilty about them and own up to them. Now all of a sudden you have much more internal emotional bandwidth. You're practicing grace for yourself. And guess what? When you practice grace for yourself, it gets easier to give it to other people. And you're modeling for your people. I always say this, kids don't need perfect parents. They need parents who know they're not perfect, Right.
Right.
And so to be able to model like, man, I messed up. And I'm not beating myself up for it, but I am owning it. And this is what I'm going to do to try to change that in the future. And do something different next time. This is what I learned about myself in the midst of it. To me, that's the key. When we are triggered, we are not failing. We are learning. And so to sort of double click on that moment and not try to race past it. Shame will say, ooh, I messed up. Let's get past that as fast as we can. Right. And so you'll even get into a cycle where you're apologizing quickly and then demanding forgiveness quickly because you don't want to stay in the mistake. Right.
Breadcrumbs, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly. As we mentioned in the book, and guilt will actually allow you to stay in the mistake longer so you can learn from it. In conversation with your people. And to me, that's the exciting opportunity when you have those setbacks. It's not to rush through it. It's to stay in it.
Yeah. Well, that's very, very helpful. And I want to listen to that 3 more times because I appreciate you helping me in the free therapy session here and everyone else listening in too. And there's a lot of other ways this can show up for other people too, right? There's a lot of ways that guilt and shame can show up with mistakes that we made, but it's inevitable. And I think, what's important, I think, is like any situation. Okay, when it happens, how do we respond to that situation? And most importantly, from a parenting perspective, how we respond is really what we're modeling to our children, so that they if we're trying to be perfect.
Yes.
They think it's not okay to not be perfect. Humans aren't perfect, so they're not going to be perfect. So if we model, we have to be. That's putting a lot of pressure and stress on them too, I think.
That's exactly right. It's tremendous pressure. I'll give you a personal example. Just a few days ago, my wife came through that holidays with COVID and was thinking about getting back to exercising. And we had our first social event since she got healthy that night. And she said, I was thinking about taking a run this morning. And I said, oh yeah, that'd be good. I mean, just be sure you don't overdo it. We got this thing tonight. And she called me out. She's like, you're like coaching me and mentoring me and telling me what to do instead of just asking. She goes, I watch you ask everybody else questions all day long. You never ask me any questions, right? Now, if I'm ashamed, my reaction to that is defensive, right? My reaction to that is geez, you're nitpicking. I was just trying to care for you, to do all the things, which I did a little bit of, to be honest with you. If guilt is guiding things, I go, that's interesting feedback. So my initial response was a shame-based one that day. I got defensive. I said, I don't know. I made some really crummy comment about well, if you want me to treat you the way I treat everybody else, then I'll do this.
Yeah.
But I shifted out of that shame and into guilt, and I've been watching myself for the last week or so, and I don't ask my people as many questions as I ask everybody else. And so I've been catching myself doing that. And it's been really cool, actually. I've been watching things shift with my 18-year-old son a little bit. He tells me something and I'm like, what's the question I would ask somebody else about that? So to be able to shift out of shame and into guilt has allowed me to start to grow again in that space.
Yeah. I have told myself before, but that asking questions is what a great way to teach. If you just ask questions, because you're getting the other person to listen. I've thought about that before. How good I am at that is probably a whole nother question. So you brought up your wife and your relationship a little bit. I want to talk about that and kind of go back a little bit now. Let's bring, to the beginning of your story. And I want to hear about, you have an interesting story about how you met and just how your relationship started and was built. So I'd like to hear about that. And I'd also like to hear about, from a career perspective, a little bit of a non-traditional path. So I'd love to get into your backstory a little bit. And then we're going to kind of come back to some of, I think, the concepts of Lovable that are going to really, really resonate with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I met my wife in graduate school at Penn State. I went to undergrad at the University of Illinois.
Go Bucks, by the way. Sorry.
What's that?
Go Buckeyes, although we just came off of a loss.
Man, we gotta end this conversation right now.
Yeah, okay. Penn State didn't have a great year. They're going through some things, but they'll be back, I'm sure. Anyway, I digress.
Well, obviously, I don't hold other Big Ten schools in terrible regard because I went to one for graduate school. So I went off to Penn State for graduate school, and we met there. She wrote home to her mom on day one. Just met this really great guy. but his name is Kelly, so it can never work because her name is Kelly as well, spelled exactly the same way. Kelly and Kelly. Yeah. And so now she did ultimately, when we did get married, she did decide to take my last name. And so now we are literally Dr. Kelly Flanagan and Dr. Kelly Flanagan, spelled exactly the same way. We wreak havoc at airport. I mean, TSA is a trip every time we go through it. Like,
this would be entertaining to watch from the sideline, like to be a fly on the wall. So like, hold on, who's what? Yeah.
Yeah, you watch the person scan my ID and then hers, and then you watch their brain sort of melt, like, we got a problem here. The interesting thing is, like, the TSA agent is instantly humanized, which is interesting. Like, we have never gone through TSA where the TSA agent doesn't end up laughing, which is like, how many people get that gift in life, that the TSA agent ends up in a better mood after they move through the line, right? So it's sort of a nice opportunity with those situations. But we get called Kelly Dad, Kelly Mom, she Kelly, he Kelly. Like, people have their ways of distinguishing us in our personal circles. But so then we graduated graduate school. We have now 3 kids, 22, 18, both boys, and then my daughter's 16. My wife taught at Christian college for a while, Wheaton College, ran their PsyD program. And then we came to a point after I wound up on the Today Show and I was about to publish Lovable. Came to a point where we sort of asked ourselves, like, if our whole life wasn't about proving our worthiness, right? And that for her had been academia and publishing and all the recognition that comes from that. And for me, it had been certain metrics around how many therapy clients I was seeing a week and all these things. If we could just, like, choose from a place of worthiness and authenticity what we wanted to do, what would it be? The answer startled us. It was, she would quit her job as a professor after getting tenure, which is crazy. She'd always wanted to, instead of teaching students how to care for children, she'd always wanted to provide services to underserved children herself directly. And I decided that I would exit my W-2, write books, and start my own therapy practice. And we both wanted to live outside of the suburban hustle and bustle. So we ended up moving out in the middle of nowhere, where she now, for 10 years, has been running an outpatient mental health center for underserved children and families in our area. And my thing has just gradually morphed from running my own practice to exiting that as well. Now running an online coaching business and doing more and more speaking and writing. So it's been an adventure. It's always a surprise, I think, when you quit letting shame lead what you're doing and you start letting your heart and your soul and your intuition lead what you're doing. It's an adventure. It's fun. It's a surprise. Always turns out better than I expected it.
What was the question you first asked yourself? I want to make sure I capture that and ask that again. But the first question you asked yourselves and you, like, really wrestled with?
Yeah. Like, if we didn't have anything to prove, right? If our worthiness doesn't depend upon what we do next, if we can do anything, because there's nothing at stake. We're okay. We're worthy. We're good enough. What would we do if we just had that sense of freedom? And it was amazing how quickly the answers started to become clear to us. And they were answers that never would have occurred to us if we were asking them from more of a shame-based, how do we prove ourselves sort of place.
Right. Well, and I think what's really important for our listeners is the concept of this ladder of success. And I like to differentiate. I've talked about this on the show before, but success versus excellence. And I think there's a difference in those, but we can pursue success. We can pursue the ladder. We keep trying to climb harder, but sometimes what we're pursuing is as you say, it's on the wrong wall. We're pursuing the wrong thing. And I don't know if you feel like you were pursuing the wrong thing, or maybe that, things happen for a reason. Those were a prep for it. But talk to me about, so you told your story, but how should our listeners try to understand this more?
It's a good question. And I wouldn't change anything about what happened in my life when I was pursuing success from a shame-based place. I wouldn't change that at all. I think you need to do that, and you need to have success in that space to discover, oh, wait, It didn't solve the shame problem, right? There's always something more I'm going to have to do to feel good enough until I learn that I ultimately am, regardless of what I do. And then you're free, right? And so I think we have to, I was once asked, why did you open your therapy practice in those years when it was open? Why did you open it in the most affluent suburb in the suburbs? Because you don't make more money as a therapist around wealthier people because the fees are capped, right? And my answer was, they're my people. They've achieved a level of success that was supposed to solve all of their inner problems, and it's not. And so now they're going to start asking the real questions of like, what do you do with this inner turmoil if the outer success isn't going to solve it, right? I want to work with people who are at that hinge in their life. But I think we have to get to that hinge. So people who are listening to this, some people might think I'm crazy and they'll go back to climbing that ladder, and they need to, right? They need to get to the top to find out that at the top, It doesn't deliver the promise that they were hoping for. Right. It's not the top. And then for those who this is really resonating, my encouragement to you is, you're at what I would call your midlife moment, which you can either turn into a midlife awakening or a midlife crisis. We turn that midlife moment into a crisis when we double down on all of the climbing that we've been doing, thinking if we can just get a little higher, then we'll find that inner peace, right? And in reality, we turn it into a midlife awakening when we start to ask different questions, climb different ladders, and live a different story. So that's sort of what happened to us. We was like, okay, we're not going to keep climbing the ladders we're on. We're going to go play a different game altogether, and it's been incredible.
Yeah, and so first of all, I had a guest on. It's been a while ago, but he talked about Eckhart Tolle, who I'm sure you're familiar with. But he just really that you can't skip. Like they had different phases probably, but you can't skip. If there's two phases, you actually have 3 acts that you talk about in your book. So I'll come back to that. Right. But you can't skip. What you were just talking about is like you can't skip phase 1. You have to learn from phase 1 to get to phase 2. From the concept of, I think, career, professional success, whatever you might call that. Like you almost have to get it to know that's not what we're really after.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there are small, subtle ways in which you can sort of recognize this as true. I mean, this just happened. I had a great conversation with my 18-year-old son yesterday morning. He was in between classes, and he's applying for colleges and doesn't quite know what he wants to do. And he was telling me about another fantasy basketball league he's in. And I was like, part of me wanted to like tell him to start to grow up and spend time on things that matter. And then it hit me like this, look at his energy, look at his passion. He's passionate about this. And I said, you'd be like, you'd really enjoy being the general manager of an NBA basketball team someday, wouldn't you? And he stopped. He's like, oh my gosh, that would be my dream job, actually. And so we started to look at career paths for that. But everything that happens that gets you to the epiphany needed to happen. Right. And to wish that we could skip over that piece of it is, it's not realistic. And in a way it's driven by its own sense of shame that I need to get somewhere. I need to get to the finish line faster. And I think when we start to learn there's no finish line, there's just the next thing we build upon, then we're sort of free of that mentality as well. Yep.
Well, I want to, so you talk about in your book, Lovable, the 3, you call it the 3 acts, but the 3 acts of your life, 3 different phases, to kind of tie it to the discussion we're having: worthiness, belonging, and purpose. And, for me, I'm trying to think about act 3, but I don't know, help our listeners understand where we may be and how to progress through those.
That's a good question. So when I wrote Lovable, I was writing my first book, and I got, through my appearance on the Today Show, got connected with a fabulous literary agent, who very seasoned, and she basically taught me how to write the book. And I'll never forget one day I was on the phone with her and she said, Kelly, you keep sending us these three things: belonging, purpose, and worthiness. Like, why are these three things the important things? And I said, no, you said them in the wrong order. It's worthiness, belonging, and then purpose. That's how we develop over and over again through that cycle. And it's in that sequence. And she said, well, that's what your book is about then. It's about the sequence of those three things. And so the idea in the book is that we are cycling through these three stages of growth over and over again in our lives, starting with establishing a sense of worthiness, knowing that we are good enough, getting connected with our true self and our authentic identity, so that we can feel confident enough to show up in the world and be authentic about who we are. Because that's the only way to establish authentic relationships, is by showing up authentically. And then once we do that, announcing who we are, seeing who celebrates that announcement and gravitates towards who we are, establishing our sense of belonging in those spaces. And then from that springboard of healthy relationships, springing into a clearer sense of our passion and our purpose. This is what I discover over and over working with people. If their relationships aren't solid, that project of trying to create peace and connection and harmony in their relationships will use up so much, as it should, use up so much of their time and energy and attention that they really aren't freed up to dial into what is my passion, what is my purpose, what's my intuition for my next step. It's part of why one of the ways that I serve entrepreneurial communities is not, even though I love talking about passion and purpose, I'm going to help you get your relationships dialed in so that those become a springboard into your passion and purpose.
They're just an enabler. Like they're foundational. They have to be there. They're enabler. Like if you don't have that, if you don't have the relationships, that is it because as a human being, I need relationships? Is it the support? Like what is it about the relationships that is so critical to get to be the springboard, to be the enabler? Like what do we need? So
we need food, shelter, and clothing, right? And then we need the safety and support of a tribe. And those two sort of almost interact interchangeably, but in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like we have basic nutritional and shelter needs, but as a human being, we are tribal creatures, right? And so to know that we have a tribe that is there for us, that we're there to serve, but that is also there to support us. There's something in our DNA that says that until we get that locked in, we're going to have a hard time investing fully in this really higher order question of passion and purpose, right? A relatively modern construct, the purpose for millennia was to get food in your mouth. Right. And now we're asking bigger questions about having freedom and choice about how we get food in our mouth. And so, yeah, I think that's it. And also, by the way, like our people want connection and they'll create conflict if they're not getting it. And conflict takes up time and energy and resources. So, that's an important piece, as well, that it's not just we need it, but our people need it from us as well.
I think this is powerful for me. And I think it's really important to make sure our audience, understands this, like who your tribe is. And I'm gonna ask you in a second how we figure out, like, does it matter who it is, or do we just need relationships? But I want to point out that, like, recently I recorded and released an episode with two guys that I have met with every single week for 4 years, and we're growing together. We're talking about our business, our health, our relationships, our faith, everything. And my relationship with them has gotten so close. And it was such a good, authentic discussion. But like what you made me realize is the reason I'm so appreciative of them is because they have given me the safety and support that I need to go to the next level in the phases that you talk about. Like that, that's kind of what's clicking with me now, is like, we need that group of people, whoever that is. My question is then, I don't have that group. Like, what if I don't have that group? I don't know how to create that group. Yeah. I'm starting at ground zero. I had someone reach out to me that's 50-ish years old saying, hey, I'm not great at goal setting and I don't know how to create that. Like, how do I pick who's in that group? Can I pick the wrong group?
It's a great question. So there, I forget which culture gave us this wonderful saying, but if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Right. And I think that's what you're getting at. Like, the support that you receive from a group like you're a part of is going to allow you to go far. It's going to allow you to sustain your growth and sustain your effort over time. How we decide to form that group, I'll share a personal story. I go back to like 2012. I'm in therapy for the first time, really, for me. And I didn't have I'd been pouring into my wife and kids. I had no social support for myself. And I remember one of the first things my very wise therapist did was he said, I want you to pick 3 guys, and I want you to reach out to them, and I want you to start to try to establish some connections with those guys. Well, how do I pick them? Right? He said, don't pick 3 guys who you think you'll end up great friends with. He said, pick 3 guys who, when you're around them, you feel less of an impulse to pretend, less of an impulse to put on a show, more comfort just being yourself. Pick 3 guys like that, and see how that plays out for you. And here we are, and that was 14 years ago, and 2 of those guys remain. 2 of the original 3 remain some of my best friends. So we want to surround ourselves. I mean, this is a truism of especially GoBundance. You want to surround yourself you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? So you want to surround yourself with people who are going to push you forward. But I also think it's essential that those people are the kinds of people that we feel a decreased burden to perform in front of, and increased comfort simply being ourselves, our real selves, our messy selves. I think that's essential. And hopefully what we're also trying to do is at home create relationships in which that is true as well. Although it's actually quite a lot harder at home, believe it or not, because of the attachment issues. But certainly in our friendship groups, that's a focus.
I've heard a lot of the different things around associations. I think from this last discussion, now I have to go back and change my chapter on associations from my book, because there's some like safety and support of a tribe. And, I've thought, and you've challenged it, and I like that, is that like just find a group of growth-minded people. But what I like is find a group of people that just let you be you. Like if you feel comfortable, like how much appreciation will you have for people if they just let you be you, help you grow into who you can become, best version of yourself, but also you're safe. I think that's so impactful, and I like that a lot.
Most wisdom, when you get all the way to the heart of it, is it's a yes and, it's a both and, right? Parenting is the same way. You have to love your child exactly the way they are and be wanting to guide them to become something more mature, right? And so I think the same is true of our social supports, like to have people who are challenging us to grow and become better. But if we don't, they love us exactly the way we are. Like that's a sweet spot.
Yeah. I want to close with a couple of important topics. So I want to get to these and then wrap up. And I want to find out more about your book, how people can find out about you. But one of your chapters is, so we're going to talk about passion, pain, and purpose. And then one of your chapters is there's no crowd at the foot of the cross. But so often, like if we talk about the success ladder and putting it on the wrong wall because we're looking for the crowd, we're thinking about, how are we getting approval? Are we, even belonging and worthiness? But there's no crowd there. And then also, there's passion, pain, and purpose. With that story, of course. So bring some of that together. That might be too many different questions meshed together, but that's why I get to ask the questions and you just have to answer them. Usually so it's just like with your kids, like you got to tell us, bring that together for us, Kelly, and talk through, passion, pain, and purpose and how these things come together.
Yeah. First of all, in that story, it's relevant to everything we've been talking about. By most conventional worldly standards, like Jesus' story was an abysmal failure, right? Like the last week of his life, he starts out and he's completely adored by the masses. He rides into town on a donkey, which is a symbol of a king, and I mean, people are throwing down palm leaves, making sure it doesn't get muddy. And by the end of it, he's got 3 people at the bottom of the cross. I mean, it happens in the space of 1 week, right? So an abysmal failure. But in that chapter, what I do is I explore this relationship between our passion, our purpose, and pain. And the idea is, number one, that I take the Latin definition of passion, which is to suffer. Passion is suffering, right? So I describe our passions as something we are willing to suffer for if necessary, right? It's something by the way, another definition of passion is extravagant fondness. So something I'm so extravagantly fond of doing that I'd be willing to suffer for it if necessary is my full definition of passion, right? And so in my case, like that would be writing. Writing is one of my passions. It's something I'm so extravagantly fond of doing, I'd be willing to suffer for it if necessary. But what we discover on our way to purpose is that if we practice our passion randomly, it doesn't feel very purposeful. Like, okay, I have a passion for writing, right? If I write travel guides, it's not going to feel very purposeful, right? Someone may have a passion for making music, but if that music doesn't address the pain that they're healing in their life, it won't feel purposeful. If they write pop love songs when really they've got some serious pain that they're needing to work through, it's not going to feel purposeful. And so when we take our passion and we apply it to healing the pain in ourselves and in the world that is similar to that pain, then we feel a sense of purpose. I have a friend who grew up with leukemia as a child, and she became a nurse. Guess where she practiced her nursing? On a pediatric oncology unit, right? Is that going to feel purposeful? Heck yeah, it is, because it's addressing her pain and that pain in the world. So this idea, I say in the book, I don't give many formulas, but if you take your passion and you use it in service of healing your pain and the pain in the world that is similar to it, you will feel a sense of purpose, guaranteed. And that's what that chapter is all about illustrating.
Yeah, I like that. And I there a lot of different books have Venn diagrams and different things, the intersection to find your purpose. Yeah. And those items absolutely are core to every single one. And I think that honestly, a lot of them have 3 or 4. Like sometimes there's money and other things. And I think the more you can simplify that to those 2 items you talked about, I think is important and impactful.
Yep. Absolutely.
But by the way, the other thing we talked about, like the ladder of success and the path of least resistance. And I things happen for a reason, or I'm looking for signs like, why should I do this? And a lot of time, you talk about this in the book, but a lot of times we things get hard and we want to course correct or change. And you talk about, let's not do that, right? Like if we're truly passionate about it, we're willing to suffer. So just because we suffer, don't look at that as like a sign from God that you got to change and go down the path of least resistance. That's not what we're talking. Like it's going to hurt.
Yes.
It's going to be painful, but if you're convicted about it, let's go after it.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm trying to undo in that chapter is the sense that if I find my God-given purpose, then like sort of the universe will open up for me. And there's truth to that, but a lot of times what people will do, because it takes courage and resilience and perseverance and bravery to follow your passion, they get that first little pushback from the world or circumstances or life, and they immediately fearfully go, uh-oh, I must not be on the right path. And that really has nothing to do with it. I mean, it's suffer with it for a little while. You might discover that you come through that pretty quickly.
Yeah, there's so much there too, and honestly, embrace the suffering. Look for the lessons in it. Like we could go on and on, but I'm so honored, Dr. Flanagan, Kelly, for this discussion and the impact you're having. The therapy session on me and helping me out and think through things, but honestly, the impact you're having on men and women, on entrepreneurs that can be lonely, it can be challenging, right? Or they're thinking about business. They have the stresses of the world, and they can bring these, your tools and your lessons home with them in their relationships with their spouses, just building strong kids. I love that you have a lot of faith-based principles throughout your book, and it's based on Christianity. So I just appreciate what you're doing. I really appreciate your time. Tell me more about the book that's coming up, and then how people can find out more about you in the book.
Yeah. So to keep it as brief as possible, I've got this next book coming out called The Road Less Triggered, turning conflict into connection with a single choice.
I'm looking forward to this one, by the way. But.
I don't know any of us who couldn't use a little bit of help with our triggers. And that's what I've discovered over the last 5 years. 5 years ago, this past New Year's Eve, I made a New Year's resolution. I was at a low in my life. Despite all the growth that came from Lovable, I wasn't able to live lovable in key moments in my life. And that had resulted in my business partnership falling apart, my best friendship with that business partner falling apart. I literally broke my collarbone because I was triggered and not very cautious on a bike ride. And so going into 2021, I made a New Year's resolution. I said, moment to moment, I will notice my heart closing and try to open it back up. I'm going to overcome my triggered moments by learning how to have an open heart in the midst of the situations where I typically close down and start to react, get defensive, fight back. And so for the last 5 years, I've been practicing that, and I sort of formed the foundation of a process, a 9-step process that can walk you through any triggered moment, so that you grow from it and you grow closer rather than growing further apart in your relationships. And it's something that has been field tested with my clients in my own life and with my readers and my online community, and it's producing great results. So finally, after 5 years, it's coming out on March 3rd, The Road Less Triggered. And anyone who wants to take a look at it and is curious about it, then go to lesstriggered.com. That's the URL that'll get you there, and you get to find out more about it. If you happen to be visiting us during the pre-order period, you'll get access to $348 of bonuses along with ordering just one copy of the book. So a great deal right now if you can get it.
We will put that in the show notes. I just pointed down. So if you're on YouTube, definitely check that out. Check out the show notes wherever you're at. Visit Kelly's website. Also have a book here, or his book, so Lovable. Make sure it's on the camera here. You can see that. Absolutely fantastic. All earmarked and just a ton of notes. The first book I read, which is an easy read too, but the Unhiding of Elijah Campbell, really impactful. No matter where you're at, whatever phase you're in, look into Kelly more, learn more about what he's doing. He's been super impactful to so many people that are trying to figure this stuff out. So Kelly, Dr. Flanagan, I appreciate it so much. Thanks for being so gracious with your time. For the Purpose Matrix, signing off.